they might not even know about the podcast. We just put out a call and said, hey, we're going to take whatever questions you have about Crashlands 2, and we'll try to answer as many as we can on the podcast, which typically means one.
Butterscotch
Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 513 of Coffee with Butterscotch, the game dev comedy podcast of Butterscotch Shenanigans. I'm Seth, and I'm the games programmer.
I'm Adam, the miscellaneous programmer.
I'm Sam, and I'm the artist.
And this is a show where we talk about life, business, and Crashlands 2.
Yeah.
Because Crashlands 2 is coming out pretty soon. Now, today's March 28th, 2020 vibes. And before we get started, we have a warning. There's going to be profanity in this show. We'd also like to thank our recurring supporters over at moneygrab.bscotch.net. Thank you so much for letting us grab your money every month to help keep this podcast going.
Hell yeah.
So we're just doing questions because it's Crashlands 2. It's under 2 weeks away from the time that we're recording this.
Yeah, it's literally a week away from the time you can listen to this.
Yeah, pretty much.
So, a week and a day. So that's...
I will say
right
on
here.
April time, the preview embargo lifts on April 3rd. So hopefully we'll see some stuff literally, quote unquote, tomorrow from you listening to this on, next Wednesday. So we're hoping something. We don't know. This is the thing.
Preview is what? It's just people being like,
there's some particulars around it. I don't know, but basically we're hoping to see something. You know what I mean?
So the preview embargo date is like, hey, please don't review this thing yet. Right. Don't give it a score, right? You could talk about that's like first impressions. You can still say you don't like it or do like it or whatever, right? But there's a whole ecosystem of like how press treats these things and how streamers treat these things and how everyone wants the exclusive, and if they can't get the exclusive, at least they can get it at the same time. And so we're trying to so that's what embargoes are not really for the game studio, actually. They're for the sort of visibility ecosystem around games, right? To sync things up so that there's kind of no unfairness going on, right?
Yes, we should see something that they have to.
Something.
But here's the thing. We don't know. This is also one of the craziest parts of this whole thing is that, work on one of these games for a bajillion years. You send it out to people, they're like, thanks for the key. And then you just don't.
Just nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're just sitting here. We're like, is there anybody playing it?
And that's the thing too, with like the preview versus the review embargo, right? So there's two embargoes to send out to people, and the preview embargo is a little bit of a weird one because it's sort of like it's really constrained, right? We're like, if you're gonna show stuff, don't show stuff after the first like 6 hours of the game, again, don't score it, and avoid certain avoid extensive spoilers, all that kind of stuff, right? And so people are really limited on the kinds of things if they're respecting the embargo that they can post between, and it's anywhere between the embargo date and like the next embargo date, right? So now there's like this week-long period where people can make
there might be a trickle of like,
but it's so constrained that the kind of stuff they want to make.
I feel like if I was a journalist in games, if I got a preview embargo, I'd be like, I'm probably just not going to bother with that.
Because you do it for basically for the big stuff normally, right? For like big AAA titles and that kind of thing. It's basically like, because everyone wants to get out first. And so the idea is like, okay, we'll let you do a little bit. It's kind of the idea, right? I
guess in that business too, it's like if you could get 3 or 4 articles out of something instead of one, that's more ad revenue, right? So
and also if you can build some hype for your audience, right? So if your audience is into games and you're like, hey, here's a cool game coming, and in the same way that we try to build hype, they're trying to sell more and more,
Right. They're like, stay tuned for our full breakdown,
Yeah, we're all, everybody in the whole ecosystem is playing the same game. None of us want to be playing
we're all in the attention economy, right?
Yeah.
Like, look at me, look at my stuff.
So hopefully, if things are going well, something should happen, I hope. But other than that, we're ready. We're locked and loaded. So
locked and loaded.
Yeah.
Actually, it's true. As of today, like in our real human time, we're getting from Loke the final
translations
of the game, and the rest of the games are already ready. So that means that we're going to bake that into the game and then make our golden 1.0 build. That's today. That's happening today. So
how many versions have we had? Like 1,400 or something?
A really large number.
Yeah.
I'm not actually sure how it's been. It's a lot.
We had so behind the scenes, our build pipeline, there's two different version numbers. So one is like your normal semver style where there's 3. It's like
that stands for semantic versioning is what that's short end.
And then there's also something called the build version, which is because of, I think it applies to both mobile platforms.
I think it's actually, Steam doesn't give a shit about versions, but everybody else, I think, has a requirement that every
for certain kinds of changes.
Well, every version you upload has to have a higher version, right?
Yes.
And higher is confusing because we were talking about these formatted versions where it's something dot something dot something, right? Then higher is kind of, it's like the same way numbers work. You know, it's like 1.2 is higher than 1.1, right? Except you just put another point something on there, but it works the same.
Yep, just keep putting more points.
Yeah. So like higher is a little bit of a weird concept, but then but that's also not how software actually works. Because when you're deploying software, what you'll usually do is be like, okay, I've got a few versions of my software that are live for different kinds of circumstances. And one version might be a little out of date, but have had a new change added to it, right? So it has to have like a smaller bump. So in total, its version is still smaller than like the main thing or whatever. But the game platforms don't let you upload things that way. They just don't let you do it. You have to, every single version number of an upload has to be bigger than any one that came before.
And so this funny thing happened like throughout development, which is each slot, like if you think about like the 3 little decimal chunks, right? You got like your big number, your middle number, and your small number. Each slot can only go up to $9.99 in a lot of these platforms. And I think it was maybe 2 years ago, we started to get into like the 900s on that third number for our build version it was sending over. So we were submitting version 100.0.935 or whatever, because we had made 935 versions of the mobile version of Crashlands 2, even a couple of years ago, right? And I remember starting to kind of sweat a little bit, and I was like, have we accounted for this?
Like, and we did. That was one of the things. Does it roll over into the next, like, like an odometer or whatever, right? Like, does it go then like 100.1.0 once we hit that 999? So we had to double check everything and make sure that. And this is the funny thing. I didn't remember for sure. So I did have to go double check it. But the version of code I wrote, I remember at the time, because there's always this question about premature optimization, right? Or like,
thinking ahead. 1,000 versions.
Yeah, and at the time, I remember thinking like 1,000 really seems like a lot of versions. But
it does.
But I was like, it doesn't seem impossible, and it doesn't even seem like fully improbable, So I was like, I'm just gonna add the extra logic here of if the number gets high enough, we just turn it over right to the next slot.
Good thing.
Yeah, that was a good thing. It was a good thing we did that because also that code is old as shit and horrible. So if I had to figure out how to add that logic back in 6 years after I wrote it, no thanks. So. Sometimes it's good to do a little touch of
sprinkle
premature optimization.
Like just in case we use the term YAGNI. You aren't gonna need it. Well, sometimes you are gonna need it, which also is YAGNI. Yeah. It's the same acronym.
Actually, anyway, it should be YANGI for you are not going to need it.
Yangi.
Yangni.
For some reason, it feels like gangly to me. It's like, that guy's really
Yangni.
Gangly.
Yeah, you are not gonna need it. Yangni.
Mm-hmm. Yangni. That way you can differentiate.
Good name for a child
from Yangi.
Yeah. So anyways, let's talk about Crashlands 2. We got questions from our listeners. I guess probably our listeners, but our community members over at the Discord.
It's fully possible they're just asking questions and not.
They might not even know about the podcast. We just put out a call and said, "Hey, we're gonna take whatever questions you have about Crashlands 2, and we'll try to answer as many as we can on the podcast, which typically means 1, maybe 2."
Last time we got through like 4.
Let's go.
I think.
Let's go. Let's
get in it. So first question comes from Just Chris, who says, "Are you going to pull an Epic and commercialize the Unreal Crashlands engine now that Game Maker has turned out as potent and effective for you as it has?" Just saying, Tim Sweeney's like the biggest private landowner in North Carolina. So I think the problem here is like none of us really want to own land in North Carolina. So
that's really what's holding me back.
Sense,
from this. Like I just
everything else is pretty much ready to go.
Yeah,
but
landowning isn't part of my ambition. You know what I mean? I'm just not.
Well, specifically North Carolina.
Right.
Honestly,
Most of it's already taken.
It's really a bizarre ass thing to be like, how much of the earth can I have? You know, like that's a fucked up kind of a.
You can only stand on like a.
You just don't need
2
very
square
much.
feet.
Yeah, it's just that's.
Tim, what do you do? Tim, what's going on in North Carolina? What's happening?
And all
over
these
there?
billionaires, because is it like Zuckerberg also like buying all of Hawaii or some shit? Like, just y'all are
Weirdos.
already you're evil and rich enough. Can you just
I don't know if I told you guys. I was watching this. You guys know Ryan George, who does. No, it wasn't Ryan George. Anyway, I was seeing a YouTuber who was basically like checking out a gym, like a home gym, at like a $16 million mansion. Okay. And he goes into this gym and it's immaculate. It has every machine you could imagine. It's giant. It's like the size of a Planet Fitness. Like it's like a warehouse, like a huge.
Does it
gym,
have
warehouse
more
size.
than one of each machine?
Yeah, it's got like doubles of everything.
Okay, sure, yeah.
It's got several dumbbell mirrors everywhere. It's got surround sound speakers. Like everything is like perfectly clean because there's staff that keep it clean. And all I could think was like, this is sad.
Yeah.
Like this looks like, imagine working out in this gym.
Yeah, it'd be
Giant
just by
place,
yourself.
Yeah.
completely alone. All you hear is your own grunts and your own weights banging against the thing. If you want a spotter, you got to like phone a friend and have them fly their private jet
A
over.
home gym is meant to be a sort of janky potential death trap. Okay, if it's well lit and oiled and immaculate, no,
It's got to be in a room clearly not meant for
exactly.
that.
No
It's gotta be
ventilation, no insulation.
storage closet, no ventilation, basement, garage, maybe.
Yep. If you drop that bar, you're done. That should be the feeling walking in.
If you drop that bar, your house.
That's how you get strong.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. If you drop
Just
your bar, the
fear.
house falls apart. That's what should be happening.
Yeah. But all I could think of when hearing about like these billionaires who like whenever they fly by themselves in a commercial jet. When they work out, they go to their giant private home gym with nobody around. Like everything they do is just like spending money to create an infinite amount of space between themselves and the rest of the world. And I'm like, no wonder they go insane. Like
It's like solitary
they're just
confinement.
completely alone all the time.
But anyways, back to the Crashlands question though. Okay. Because this Crashlands question.
Are we gonna convert? Are we gonna make a Crashlands engine?
Here's the deal. The game changer is excellent and the coolest thing ever. Cake Frames is also excellent and one of the coolest things ever. Both of them,
True.
humongous sort of additions to our overall Game Maker toolkit.
Yeah, and if you're a new listener to the podcast, those are basically the tools that allowed us to make Crashlands 2. One is for managing the data, and one is for making it really slick to build all the user interfaces.
That's right. So the furthest we've gone is actually more so with Adam's tooling in terms of like availability, which is the Stitch and all of our work to basically make working outside of the GameMaker IDE available. Like those are all available publicly. You can get them if you're a GameMaker programmer. The Stitch extension for VS Code and like all of that is something you can get. But as far as our abilities to like actually do something with that next layer that we built with Game Changer and all that, it's so. I guess Game Changer is more of like a way of being.
I would say there's kind of two core problems.
Yeah. I was also going to say
is-
there are two. Let's see if they're the same two.
Yeah. So one is right now everything is pretty deeply embedded in a lot of our kind of I'd say proprietary, but like our own internal stuff. And so to take for example like just the Game Changer and put that into somebody else's project, it would require a lot of shenanigans to kind of disentangle it from like. For example, just as a simple example, like maybe Game Maker doesn't have a built-in function to like delete a specific thing from an array, which is true. But we have that because we made it, and so the Game Changer uses that function. But that function isn't like in the Game Changer code. It's just in like our we call it the Butterscotch pack. It's like our own collection of kind of.
Well,
stuff.
in Game Maker, kind of nothing is in a specific. It's just kind of all available.
It's just all in a pile.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like one problem is kind of like we would have to kind of take a bunch of stuff that is it's like a dependency chain where the Game Changer sits on top of it and the rest of our stuff is underneath. So we have to kind of pull everything up the chain and package it all together in one thing. Then the second problem is, how the fuck do you even deliver that? Because Game Maker doesn't really have a modules system that has like controllable versioning and stuff.
In theory, they're doing like basically a package manager, coming up as part of their new shtick. But I mean, that's
just a theory.
Yet, so,
a Game Maker theory.
Yeah, we don't know how that works.
And package management for any software ecosystem is it's one of the biggest challenges there is in like sharing and dealing with modular software. And if you talk to anybody in any ecosystem, so me personally, I'm in the JavaScript/Node.js ecosystem, and I actually like the package management, right? But if you talk to somebody who works, if you talk to somebody who works in like Python, I believe I've heard Python people say that they like their package management. But if I go try to do Python stuff, or somebody even Python tries to go do Node stuff, all you're going to hear is the most vile profanity and complaints, because it is brutal trying to cross the streams and figure out how the fuck does this actually work?
A lot of it is just, what are you used to,
but it's a hard problem, because it's where does stuff come from, right? Because it's going to come from the internet somehow. How do I authenticate to get access to it? Can things be private or not? How does version management work? And then it's the dependency tree, which is like, I want this version of this thing. It itself depends on these other three things, and each one of those has its own version history, and it becomes a nightmare very fast, especially if it's like, I want to get these two things. Each one of those depends on the same other module, but different versions of it.
Yes, I was going to say that. Yeah,
that's where you get in trouble. Yeah.
It's really complicated.
So because there's not a robust system like that, we wouldn't really be able to deliver the game changer to other developers. But then kind of the final bit is it's not just that internally the game changer is built on like a stack of dependencies. It's also externally hooked into dependencies, which is Rumpus. Like right now, it talks to our web server, and that's like how we sync files and stuff through the game changer. And so we would have to come up with basically like a fully independent stack of all of that stuff to figure out how to do it. But we don't even know if people want it, because like
that's the final bit.
Because what we kind of found is like the game changer, without getting into too much detail, it's costly to set up, but extremely reusable. So if you're making a game where you have, like in the case of Crashlands 2, we got, I don't know, like 1,300 quests, right? So if you're making a lot of the same type of thing, then that upfront setup cost to describe a quest in the game changer and make it an editable thing, it pays off.
I would say if you're making even a few things, but each of those things has a lot in it. It's basically a scale. It's scale in either direction, right? It's like the creatures of Crashlands. There's only like, I don't know, like 12, 15 or something, like different kinds, right? So there's not actually that many. It's not like the quests where there's like literally 1,000. But
if you
each
don't
one
count
of them,
the critters.
Yeah, but each one of them is like so complicated, right? So complicated that being able to share that level of complexity across is kind of the same. You get kind of the same thing at the end of the day, right? So it's either scale within or scale across, in terms of managing complexity.
Yeah. It basically boils down to like a number of editable things, right?
Yes.
So and also like kind of explaining to other, because like a lot of especially like smaller teams, which is typically who uses Game Maker, they'll have a particular way of developing their games, which is probably pretty code heavy, in the sense that like if they want to put something in their game, they just do it through the Game Maker IDE, and they're not really worrying about developing like a larger tool chain or whatever. Like if they need something, they just code it up, and then you're good to go, right? And so taking that leap that we did from kind of like understanding the difference between just data and code, and then recognizing the value and importance of having a tool that can independently operate on data and having the code handle that it's kind of a big jump in terms of like explaining to somebody how it works and why it is useful.
And I think to your point, it's not a thing that you need in all cases, nor that even all teams
of the time you wouldn't need it, and even like when we talk about we want to do some more game jams in the near future, now that we're kind of getting out of the dev hole of Crashlands 2. And it's like, well, will we use the game changer in our jams? It's like, well, I mean, probably not, because there's just not enough time to make a fuckload of content in a jam. And so if you have this upfront setup time to get the game changer set up so you can make a lot of content, well, now the jam is over. You don't have
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing with these really, elaborate tools. And again, like going back to other programming ecosystems, you see this there too, right? So if you go look at like one of my open source projects that's like, it's got Stitch, which is the tool that has all kinds of features for making game maker stuff automatic and easier. If you go look in there, it's like the degree of configuration complexity of that project is enormous, right? If you open up that project and look at the files that you first see, there's like a dozen configuration files for different kinds of services and things, right? And if you open up any like sub project in there, the same deal. There's like 5 or 6 configuration files that like make sure that stuff is going to work the way it's supposed to, that decide how things get built and how they get deployed and like all this kind of stuff, right? So anytime you're dealing with a software project, you're going to have some amount of configuration to make sure that it works smoothly. The bigger the project is, the more you're going to need extra tooling that helps manage just the complexity and scale of the thing. All of that stuff requires configuration.
It all has cost. It all has a fixed cost.
Yeah, so
right? It's because generally you configure it once and you're done. If the configuration takes a day to kind of comb through and get it all kind of put together, well, again, in a jam, you got 2 days.
Yeah. So if I just need like a one-off script to go solve a little problem that I have, like I don't go build up that whole ass ecosystem, right? I just I write the script and I suffer a little bit because I don't have all the features I'm used to make sure things go well, but it's not worth.
It's still way faster.
It's still way faster ultimately than doing all that extra.
Because at the end of the day, it's all about delivery, right? Like get the thing done and ship it. So at the moment we have no, and probably for every moment forever, we have no plans to take this internal stuff from Crashlands 2 and make it external. If something dramatic changes in terms of future versions of GameMaker or module support or things like that, we can at least entertain the possibility of it. But at the moment, we can't even start.
Oh, I think more likely would be, again, without promising anything, I think the more likely thing we would do is open source it, because for the game maker,
people figure it out.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. There are 2 reasons for that. For the game maker ecosystem, there's just not a large paying market for professional tools, right? And so the cost of us like dealing with all of that to like make it something that people can buy, make sure it's got proper support, like all that kind of stuff.
Not there.
The market's not there for it, so it would be a financial loss for us to actually do that. So if we wanted to make it available to other people, the way to do it would be to open source it. And the other benefit of that is that we can basically say like, hey, it's free. So if you've got problems with it, you figure that out,
and if you want a new feature, go ahead and just fork it. And
this is what I've done for like Stitch, for example, is like Stitch is meant to solve our problems. It's just like one level higher of like generic abstraction so that it'll work for any of our games, and it'll work for a large fraction of potential game maker projects, but not all of them, right? Like it won't just work for anything. And I have people submit issues to the project pretty frequently of like, hey, like this thing doesn't seem like it has Mac support. I'm like, that's true.
Sure doesn't.
Sure don't.
Like, and it's just that it's like, we don't have to support everything if we aren't financially obligated to, right? And so to me, like that's the middle ground I always like for stuff is
nobody paid for it, so it's like there's no
Yep.
Yeah, and I do fix stuff when I'm like, oh yeah, like that does really suck for people that this thing is happening, even if it's not hitting us. I'm like, oh yeah, there's like if it's a little fix and it'll just like make other people's lives a lot easier, then I'll do that.
Well, it just gives you the flexibility to do that, and also lets
you get to choose
improve it, right? That's probably the direction we go if we're going to do it at all.
Yeah, just blast it out there into the ether and be like, this is your problem now.
Yeah.
If somebody submits an issue, we'll be like, yep.
Yeah.
All right, next question comes from.
There's an interesting sort of general idea though, right? Is that if we were using a different engine that had a large population of people who were making games professionally at scale and generating revenue doing
the
it,
calculus changes a lot.
Yeah, then whether or not we're going to open source things versus try to abstract and then buy it off and sell things, those are dependent on what the population of people using the tool look like, and then how the system works. Because like Seth was talking about, it's really hard to do modular stuff across projects in GameMaker. I don't know how true that is in other game engines because we don't use any other game engines. But if that was less true and it was easier to do modular stuff, then and you start combining these things together about an ecosystem, and how the business proposition changes for all this kind of stuff, right? And it's one of the things that's always really important when you're picking software is to not just ask what do I like the best, like just experientially, but also to ask like, what platforms does it support? What does the ecosystem look like? Who else is using it? What are the long-term things this unlocks or locks, right? Yeah.
Yep. So there's a lot of considerations in there, but we'll keep it locked down for now. Next question comes from Drunken Slav, who says, an important question I feel we all have is, will there be sufficient amount of crab and crab-like creatures in the game? So the thing about crabs, they got all those legs.
Yeah. A lot
so
of legs.
what's the term? What's the term for things evolving into crabs?
I believe that same person asks another question where they mention the term, but I can't remember. It's not carcin. It's like it sounds like cancer because carcinogen, right? But it's not that. It's like a word that sounds really similar.
Carcinization or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
But there's like this kind of running joke / sort of a truism that oftentimes things over time just evolve into crabs, because crabs are just like a very resilient kind of a style of life forms. If you think back to like trilobites and stuff, like crabs have just they popped up pretty early. And even little things like lice and like little insects are just like tiny crabs, basically.
Yeah, it's the idea of the idea of convergent evolution, right? As things start from a different point and end up somehow similar to each other, right?
Crabs.
Yeah. So for crabs, there's like tons of stuff that are crab-like, basically, because it's a very robust and useful survival structure.
In Crashlands 2, there are no crabs, and there's actually good reasons for this. One, as Seth pointed out, legs. Annoying. You know what I mean?
I don't want to draw those. Do you want to draw those legs?
Do you want to animate all those legs?
So, try to keep the leg limit to like 4,
Yeah, the ideal number of legs in a video game is 0 because then you don't have to animate.
Everything's a hovering sphere, like in physics,
Yep.
Imagine this cow as a sphere in a vacuum.
That's the ideal scenario. So that's number 1. Number 2 is actually hard bodies. And this comes down to animation. So because everything's hand animated, curves in drawings and animations hide like sort of some of the geometry complexity, like turning an object in space. So what I mean by that is that if a character is kind of plump, and that's why you see this in most cartoons, that sort of thing, things just being kind of like round, soft shaped.
Yeah.
Then you don't have to be so precise with your drawing about like when it turns, right? Because it's the same if it's a sphere, which you go back to, if a sphere turns, it's still just a sphere. You know what I mean?
Yep.
In 3D space, you don't there's nothing changed.
Tell that it turned.
But a cube's got a lot of hard corners, right? And so if you mess up basically the angle of those, then you can really see it. And so one of the things that you'll notice in Crashlands, like hard bodies, there's one of them in the mantle, the trunkle has like a hard shell. And it's funny because, of course, I made the design for that before I had done enough like of this traditional animation to realize this was going to be very annoying. And so like as you go deeper into the game, there's no hard bodied stuff. Everything is just sort of in that squishy land because it's.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that. Yeah, the trunkle does feel less animated than the other.
It's stiffer.
Yeah, it's more stiff, but it's like, well, yeah, it's
just literally
what's it gonna do? It's a shell,
exactly.
Like
So
it can't bend.
Yeah, when you go to do even like smear frames and stuff, you have it's a different question where it's just like, well, yeah, but can you like if that shell is so hard, should you like distort it however you want, or is that just weird? And so it was one of those things I didn't realize early on. But yeah, there's not crabs because shells are also annoying. Turns out, hard stuff is hard to draw. I guess that's
why it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
Hard things.
We do have a spider / crab-like thing that is not animated.
What's that? I don't even know.
The big nope.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yeah, you'll say there's one thing that I would say is crab-like. So the answer is yes. There's crab-like stuff. There's crab-like one thing, and that crab-like one thing is fully unanimated.
Yeah, that's true. I guess if there's like shrimp, there's some fish things, right? So like there are some things that are adjacent, but nothing that is animated. Yeah. Because no thanks.
Yeah, no thanks. Our next question comes from Steak Shop, who says, "Why did you decide to give Crashlands 1 for free on Epic Games And are there any plans of doing that with Crashlands 2 as well?
Oh,
Well, the biggest and only reason is they gave us money. We would not give something away for free if we believed that would be. Because here's the thing, selling copies of games is how we live. Like, that's how we keep going. That's how we fund the next game. That's how we pay our staff. That's how we pay ourselves.
If we didn't have to, if we could just live and then make games and give them away for free, that'd be fucking dope.
Yeah, that'd be great. And so when it comes to like in a situation like that where it's like, okay, here's the like Epic Games platform every week, or it was every day, I can't even remember.
Every week, yeah.
They would have a free game that they give out, and in every single case, it's because Epic paid the developer some amount of money. And usually it was a game that had been out for quite some time, right? So in a way, we kind of thought about it in the same way as like a steep discount. Like if we do a steep discount on Steam, you know, like 90% off.
Or like a Humble
Bundle
Bundle or something, you know?
Yeah. It's like, all right, so we're making like 10% of the normal amount of money that we would make.
Oh, actually, way worse than that because the number.
Way worse.
Oh, yeah. As in like for almost all of the keys we've ever given out for the game, or like almost all the download, like legal official downloads for original Crashlands came from that 1 week on Epic Games.
That's true. Yeah.
It's like literally like 3.5 million or something insane.
Oh yeah, this is insane. The numbers are crazy on it,
which is awesome.
Yeah. So we're talking like
we
fractions of a penny on the dollar, you know. And so you only really want to do that if you basically say like, okay, most people who have bought the game at full price or on Steam or whatever have probably bought it by now. We don't think there's like a huge remaining market for us to tap into. And if you basically say like, we think that this can potentially kind of like reinvigorate the game or introduce the game to new people or whatever. But you wouldn't do it, say, like 6 months after launch, you know, because it's like the game is still fresh. There's still a market of people willing to buy it at its normal price and stuff like that.
And in the case of the Epic, because the Epic Game Store, we are also like, Epic is trying to build, you know, a competitor to Steam. They're trying to do that by being like, well, Steam is where all your games are. So let's like have all your games here.
Let's chip away at that games library.
Yeah. So the way that we also thought about it too, we were like, realistically, people aren't choosing Epic over Steam. It's not happening. Right. So we weren't worried about cannibalization across platforms of people getting original Crashlands on Epic for free, you know? And as a new store that is basically for Fortnite, we were also like, we also can't sell Crashlands on the store in a meaningful way because nobody buys games there, you know? So we were like, if we can participate in this program, then we still get to basically be on the platform, have the game be successful in at least some sense of the word on the platform, but in a way that's like tailored to that platform that doesn't really interfere with anything else. And this is also how kind of subscription services work and that sort of thing. You try to figure out like, if we do that, does that actually allow us to get something out of this platform without harming us otherwise, right? And so for that, the answer felt like a yes. Yeah.
But I will say that I know that I think in one of their legal cases or something, there's some spreadsheet that came out that was showing like how much they paid for different games to do this, right?
I think it didn't show which games, but somebody went through and like did some sleuthing to try to like pair up what the pricing was for all the different games. So
it was something like that. It was, oh man, that's some comedy. And I think it always goes back to the fact that like indies don't typically negotiate because they're of the mind that it's like, oh wow, you know, it's just good that like, I guess Epic offered us this thing, so we should just take it, you know. There's a lot of that, I think, in the like indie business.
There was some serious lowballing in that.
Insane lowballing. It's like, I thought we got actually, I think after seeing that, I was like, okay, we got an actually good deal, you know, on this comparatively to other.
Because we negotiated.
It felt like I remember it felt like just an okay deal when we did it.
Yeah.
But compared to what everybody else got, we're like, oh, okay, this is.
Yeah. Well, but I will say, I've been thinking a lot about this idea of like transparency with money, because of course, like anytime you're in a conversation with a company like this where you're negotiating contract or whatever, either there's an implication that it's secret, right? It's like, don't talk about this, or explicitly you sign an NDA.
It's almost always explicit. Yeah,
you sign an NDA before like talking about dollar values, right? And so, I mean, it's like no indie will ever know how much other indies got offered.
Correct.
If you ask, they can't tell you, et cetera. So everybody's just completely on their own. You have no idea whether you're getting ripped off or getting a good deal or whatever. But I was thinking about how like I wonder what would happen if a law was passed. It literally just, all I said was, if you are a company, then every quarter you have to publish the salaries and compensation packages of every employee. I wonder what would happen.
With regards to
I'm
the
thinking
games,
like,
though? I mean,
no,
it's
just like just
unrelated.
in general, because it's kind of similar in the sense that, like, it's about asymmetry of bargaining power, right? Where like if you don't have information on the like from the person who's handing out the money, like you don't know how much they're giving to other people, then your capacity to negotiate and advocate for yourself is zero because you have no frame of reference.
Yeah. Well, I think what's
you
weird
know?
is that in the even bigger power dynamic case, like the reality is that as employees, it's fully fine for you to ask your other.
It's
your
legal, yeah.
It's fully legal for you to ask.
It's
your
actually
coworkers.
illegal for your employer to tell you can't.
Yeah,
you know?
but in the case of the like on the on the game dev business side, there's a reason why people
business to
also go
business,
with publishers in this regard because they've published multiple games, right? They've had
The publisher at
multiple
least knows
discussions,
how
they have
much
more
they've been
information.
offered on the rest of the
Exactly.
game.
And so they in theory could get you a much better deal because they got more context.
Yeah,
right?
publisher is kind of like a union, right?
Yeah, it's supposed to be.
In that sense, is they have access to more information spread across a larger number of people.
Right,
And
but
so
their
in
union
theory-
dues are just half your salary, so that's the tricky part, right?
A little high, a little steep.
Yeah, steep.
For being honest. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's it's like, ultimately, the reason we did it was it seemed like a pretty good deal. We got paid for it.
More Crashlands players. Good.
Yeah. And we would do that for Crashlands 2 as well. If
it looks like
similar
a good deal.
Yeah. If a similar deal appears at a similar point in the life cycle of the game, of like 5-6 years from now, if it looks like, sales numbers are kind of at a low point and we want to get an influx of new players and something like this comes up. Yeah.
Well, and the other way to
do
think
it.
about this too, from if you're Epic in this thing, right, is you can either get a game like Crashlands for cheap by waiting until the game's been out for a long time and is deep in the tail and is not generating that much revenue anymore, and being like, hey, we can give you a relatively huge boost to your revenue at a relatively small total cost to us, right? If we're Epic. If you want one of those like fresh games, especially
One of
like
them
a
day
big
ones,
title, then then what you're paying for is not just paying for it on your platform. It's basically you're saying like, I'm also offsetting all of your losses, your lifetime losses, right? For giving this game away for free on our store, right? And that is fucking expensive, right? And so
expensive
Epic in the
that
early
most
days,
companies they cannot pay for it.
they
Like,
absolutely
literally
won't do
cannot.
it. Yeah. This is why these games come to these services and subscription services and stuff relatively late most of the time, is because if either they only come early if there's so much asymmetry between the developer and the store, right? That the only way to sell it at all is that way. Or if the store is actually going to, again, pay for all of your theory, because it's also theoretical losses, because nobody knows.
It's a huge risk at that point.
Yeah. So everyone's taking a huge risk the earlier that happens, which is why it tends to happen significantly later for most games.
All right, next question comes from Melody Lunar Bunny, who says, are there any features or items you're particularly excited for players to try out, and why? As an example, something like, we added fishing, and I don't know how many people will try it, but it has a lot more depth than people expect. This is for me less about people engaging with the system at all, but more about the way that they engage with it.
What do you mean?
Okay, which is for me, the equipment system in Crashlands 2 has an absolutely bonkers amount of depth to it in terms of the way that you can combine different items and trinkets and gadgets and set bonuses and effects and triggers and procs and buffs and whatever, and your pet to create really bizarre combinations of synergies and ways of playing the game. In some cases, a very overpowered way if you find like a really good combination. But we have equipment sets, which is basically we've kind of like grouped items together in sort of a similar play style. So as an example, there's an electricity set of items called the capacitor set. So pretty much every item in this set has something to do with electricity, doing electric damage, whatever, right? But that's not all that it does. That's just the direction that it leans, that it kind of supports, right? And so if you only equip capacitor items, which is possible because there's enough of them that you can just put capacitor items in every single slot, then yeah, you're like really doubling down on just that, like just electricity, right? But if you mix and match and you add in like 2 pieces of another set, then you get like a set bonus from that, and it introduces new weird effects that in most cases actually make you stronger than if you had just like gone all in on just the one thing. And what we kind of saw in the beta is that at least like in people's kind of first playthrough is people would have a tendency to find a playstyle that they really liked, and then they would only equip items from that set, and they wouldn't do a ton of like mixing and matching. And I feel like it's probably something that people will do like once they have played the game longer and get a little bit deeper into it, you know? But just that idea that like for me, even like, you know, toward the end of the first act, like mixing, like we have the slinger set, which is about like throwing spears and bombs and stuff. Like mixing that with the capacitor. So it was like half and half, like spear throwing electric person. It was like, you could do some really, really cool shit with it. And I'm hoping that people do, you know, a bit more experimentation, like in the longer run with it, because it's just kind of the amount of depth in that is just wild.
Yeah.
And if you only equip one type of item, then you're not really getting to see all.
Yeah, I'd say you're still getting a bunch of these. You're still getting like, I guess the like the easy mode, right? Where it's like we've color coded.
Yeah, they all
items.
do still synergize and work together.
Exactly. But you can once you start thinking about it less on just the the colors of the sets and more like what is the set doing and how do I like hybridize that with another set, whatever that one's doing. Then you start getting really funky stuff, which is pretty cool to see.
Yeah. So even just basic stuff like I think the chemist set, which is about poison, it has a 2-piece bonus, which is like whenever you put poison on something, you get haste, which makes you attack faster. And like early game, there's a pet that you can get that allows your weapon and spear attacks to sometimes poison enemies. So even if you don't really have like a good consistent way to poison stuff, if you can get 2 of these items and use that pet, then you get this like crazy amount of haste that then works with anything else that you're doing. And then of course, like you're also doing poison damage, which is great, right? And so there's just like all these little things that just start to open up. We're like, ooh, I wonder if I like mix this and these 2 things.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Then blah blah blah.
I think mine is definitely more granular, which is there's a specific kind of item, which is the fishing. Some items you could fish up that you can wield. And we did this just silly thing with them where they're slippery. Okay. And all that it means is that as you're swinging them around, every so often they'll just slip out of your hand. And again, this is because of all just the insane abilities and reaction stuff that we're able to put together on the back end to allow this, frankly, kind of like insane concept to be able to just be real in the game.
They're like slapstick weapons, basically.
Yeah. So you're like, you're using it and then it just fucking, and it makes this like great, slipping out of your hand.
It just leaves your hand. It flies through the air.
And then it draws a telegraph somewhere else. And you got to get over there to catch it before it hits the ground. Otherwise, it's gone. You'd have to fish it up again. Yeah. And it's absolutely hilarious. And like, I love them because they're kind of like, they're very powerful whenever you are able to get one because they're like the only weapon really that, has almost like what you consider like a durability to it, right? Because it can be destroyed.
Yeah, it can be destroyed. Yeah.
And so,
well, if you don't catch
fish
it, it's
another one
gone.
out, but yeah,
if you don't catch it. And so it's a very funny thing where it's like, I love using them because it just introduces this weird chaos minigame. You're just like chopping some trees or something with this weird fish, and then it just fucking leaves, and then you gotta go catch it before it like hits the ground, and it's just I don't know. It's a very
there's basically there's like 2 things that it does. One is if you recognize that it might slip out of your hand, and you realize like, oh yeah, I'm using this slippery item, I gotta pay attention, right?
Yep.
Then it introduces
you gotta pay attention.
It introduces this kind of tension to like like I think one of them is a plant chopper, one of them's a mining pick kind of a thing. And it's like, all right, I'm mining right now. I'm using this item. I gotta pay attention. And like every time you swing it, you're waiting for that sound for it to fly out of your hand. Because I think you have like 1.7 something seconds to catch it. It's like you don't have too much time. And so it adds this kind of like franticness. And like the other thing that it'll do is if you're just like in the zone and you're just kind of like,
oh yeah, it'll catch you off guard.
Yeah. And you forget that you're using this slippery item, right? Then like at some point you just be like, wait, where the fuck is my pick? Right? Like you just like didn't even notice that it flew.
You're just
It
slapping
either adds
things.
it either adds like chaos or confusion, and you're just like, what the hell? But it was pretty funny though, because I think the first time you get one of these slippery items, there's like a conversation between Flux and Juicebox about how slippery it is, right? And then
It says it on the tooltip too. Like
yeah. And then like on the tooltip for the item, it's like, be sure to, like, it might slip out of your hand, so be ready to catch it. And so there's several different places where we like stop the game and point out to the player, like, this thing's slippery and it's going to slip out of your hand. But in the beta, nobody acknowledged this because it just seemed like flavor.
Yeah.
Right. Where it's like,
it's the same kind of thing we would write for literally everything in the game.
Right. And also because it's far-fetched. Like like it's not a thing that feels like it would be possible. Like in the game context, right?
But it's like also, what does that mean? In the like,
what does it mean? Yeah,
yeah. Because the idea, like, I don't think anybody, even if they did get the idea that, like, oh, I'm going to lose it somehow, right? They wouldn't interpret that to me like I'll be in the middle of chopping and
it's going to fly out of my
suddenly I'm playing a mini game where I have to catch it. Right? Like,
I got to go catch it. Yeah.
Yeah. The only way to figure that out is to be paying enough attention the first time it happens that you understand what has just happened, so that you can then deal with it the next time. Because like I don't think anybody on the planet is going to catch the first time they lose it. Not. No one is going to fucking catch it.
Well, but there's RNG here, right? Because there's just a flat % chance for it to fly out of your hand every time you swing it. And so for some people, they might like get it, and on the first swing, it flies out of their hand, right? And they'll be like, oh, right? But if you've been using it for a little while, and you just kind of get lulled, you just get lulled into this false sense of security of like, oh, it's okay, it's just like a regular weapon or whatever. And then you're not even paying attention, and suddenly it's gone.
I think that's part of the problem too, is that if the distance between you being told, hey, this is slippery, keep an eye on it or whatever, and it just not existing anymore because you don't see, again, like I've got like the first like 3 of these that I had, I did not see them disappear. I just at some point was like, the fuck? It's just not here.
Slapping things, yeah.
So, and if that distance is long enough, then you're just not going to make that connection. You're just going to be like, you're just going to be confused and be like, the fuck?
But I think the thing I like about that, though, is the fact that like the game has to be big enough to be able to allow an item as dumb as this to exist. You know what I mean? Like you have to, because on the design side, like you couldn't have a game that was just that item because that would be bad, right?
Annoying.
But like the fact that it's basically just like a bonus item that you can sometimes get, right? And so the game has to be big enough to support it.
They're good. They're strong items.
They're very strong.
Usually when you get one, it's worth using, even though it might slip out of your hand.
Yeah. And then like the technical background required to like make that possible. I don't know. It's one of those things where like a lot of what we tried to do is make it so that every time you get just a new thing, it makes you feel like your understanding of how much is possible in the world is like opened up, right? And it's one of those items where it's so ridiculous that it feels like it really does a really good job of that. And I think that's why I like it the most.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So it's also that like we treat the fishing as a pretty optional path for the most part in the game, where like it's kind of parallel to everything else, and it's used to make like lots of consumables. It helps with gardening and stuff like that. But it's not like a hard gate that like you have to do a bunch of fishing in order to progress through the game, right? And so so we just kind of layered in some stuff like that. That's just these fun, goofy, weird things that you can fish up and just have. And I think if you fish really early,
oh, it's huge. Huge.
That is a huge power gain. Because I feel like speedrunners will actually probably go after some of these fishing items. You know,
I think they wouldn't because they're too. Because speedrunners tend to go for things that they can have a defined sort of path with, you know, and that don't cause things to get derailed, right? Because I think speedrunners are like going to not engage with that.
That's potential. Yeah, I guess because if they slip out of your hand, it's like now you're fishing it up, and then you got to
go to your equipment menu and get a new item, and there's like a whole bunch of stuff that happens. So yeah, my bet is this going to be for the people who are just like there's going to be a set of people who just think it's fucking hilarious, right?
Yeah, I use them as long as I can because I just think they're so funny. Like every time
and also they're good, right? So people who are like playing the game doing some min-maxing, I think, but like they're not playing for speed. They're playing for like power and the enjoyment of the experience. I think that's going to kind of be where that sweet spot is.
All right, last question of the episode comes from Overdrive. This is a big one. All right. You guys ready?
Ready.
The question is, Juice Mancy?
Juice Mancy? So Juice Mancy was a system in the original game that we added in the first major update for the game after the quality of life patch, where basically we dropped little crystals of juice out of kind of everything as a secondary currency, and then you could essentially refactor your weapons and armor to consolidate the randomized stats as a way of controlling that kind of stat management on the itemization you had, largely because, contextually, we didn't have enough levers to make like really cool sets and stuff back then, truthfully. And so the way that itemization worked in the original game was through this randomization system. Right. So you build a weapon, it's got random stats on it. Maybe you don't like them, you build another one.
Just meant that like a lot of what like min-maxers would do in original Crashlands is build a armor, build a weapon, whatever. And we randomized what stats it had and also the quality of the item. So like sometimes you would craft it and just like randomly get an epic chest piece or something that has like extra stats. So that meant that there was a huge degree of unpredictability in just like as you geared up.
Yep. Suddenly,
like maybe like previous tier, you had like a bunch of bonus fire damage, and now suddenly you've got a bunch of like damage reflect, right? So your playstyle is like changing all the time because your stats are essentially random.
Yep.
So Juice Mancy was a way to control that.
Yeah. So I think we don't have any plans for Juice Mancy in that way. You know what I mean? Because it doesn't make any sense, but conceptually, it's the sort of thing that we could bring forward, in any kind of update or whatever else, depending on
some kind of concept of you put your items in.
Just specialize.
But there's an important reason, which is that original Crashlands, so the world is random, the items stats are random, right? Mm-hmm. Crashlands 2 is pretty deterministic. So like if the world is hand built, it's not a randomly generated world. And the items that you craft, they're the same every time. Mm-hmm. Like if you craft a specific dagger or whatever, like that dagger has the same stats and works the same way in every playthrough. And that predictability is what allowed us to build out the equipment set system that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, I'd say everything is actually a unique piece, like a unique fixture of a play style, as opposed to being like just like a randomized, I don't know, kind of soupiness.
Well, I think it's the difference. It's like that's a good demonstration of the difference between procedural generation and handcrafted designed content, right? Because we talked about this with the map, where the map of the original game is also procedurally generated. The map in the new one is handcrafted, right? And the difference is basically in like the density of because basically like in the original everything is unique also, right? Like every item is fully unique because it's got a different set of stats and stuff, right? Everywhere in the world is fully unique because it's part of random percentage.
But it's not that like
it's not unique in an interesting way, right?
Yeah, it's not unique experientially. And I think that's the funny thing is like and I think whenever you talk to people like, what did you do with Juice Mancy, right? In the original game. And it's like usually you just like compound a particular item or particular like stat that you like across all of your gears, so you have like maximum vampire or like maximum damage reflect. In other words, you create a set out of basically like a stat.
You pick a stat and you go all in, right?
Yeah, because you're creating a play style, right? So I guess what I'm saying is like Juice Mancy is not here, but the actual like fun
consequence of it.
Yeah, the set building, the like play style specific stuff is here in like a much bigger, much more impressive way in Crashlands 2.
Yeah. So didn't need it. Just don't need it. All right. So I think we'll end there with the questions. And again, in the Discord, discord.gg/bscotch, we have an announcements channel where we are accumulating more and more questions. And we're going to do one more round of questions in the next episode because it'll be the last episode we record before the game comes out.
And it'll come out the day before launch, which is fucking wild. So that's
So if you have any good questions, if there's something that's itching in your brain that you want us to take a crack at, go ahead and jump in there and drop the question, and we might. We got a lot of questions in there, so we may get to it. But that's all the time we have for this week. We'd like to thank our producers Fat Bard and Sampa DaCosta for putting the podcast together, and thanks to our community moderators who keep our Discord running. To get more involved in the Butterscotch community, just go to podcast.bscotch.net, where we have links to the Discord, a way for you to donate, and links to the podcast archives. And if you haven't yet, head on over to Steam and give Crashlands 2 a wish list. Go pre-register on Google Play and pre-order on the App Store because it's coming. Mm-hmm. And all of those little things help boost the game's visibility for launch, and it'll help it get the audience that we think it deserves. So thank you all for listening. And we'll see you next week.
Bye.